So Morrowind comes out, it's beyond what we need. It's a much bigger success than we anticipate, or it's huge. And it's really huge on Xbox. The audience that wants this is much bigger than we think. Knowing that, what would we do with interfaces and things like that while having, what did we learn from Morrowind? What's all the feedback now that the audience is much bigger? And there's obviously a number of things if you compare the games. The other one was we knew we wanted a tone shift. Like, okay, we want to do this thing in the Empire. We don't want you to be like the prophesized hero per se. You're more the Lancelot to a King Arthur. So we kind of like, we're going to tilt back to some other things. And then Microsoft, because of the relationship, gets us in early on the 360. And you see that machine and you're like, whoa. And we threw the technology rock.
Actually, that was a very interesting 4 years for us because we were traditionally a PC developer all along, even though Morrowind was on Xbox. It took us a while to really pivot, and it's hard for developers to do this. If you're traditionally a PC developer and you start making console games, like it takes a different mindset. Oblivion was sort of our learning curve. That was our project to learn how to make games for consoles, how to make games run fast and look good, and within the constraints the consoles have.
I remember we were one of the high-level goals, not officially, but we had been talking that like, if Morrowind was the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the books, right. There's a lot of text, then Oblivion will be the Lord of the Rings movie trilogy. Much more visceral, a different aesthetic, more colorful, more accessible in a lot of ways.
We were working on it for the Xbox 360 at the time, which was not actually out. So we were working on hardware that was not done yet. So anytime you're trying to make a game, you don't know what the game is yet, and you don't know what the hardware is, that combination can prove stressful. That, and then just how do we take a huge open-ended role-playing game that's traditionally been on PC. They put Morrowind on console, but sort of the next evolution of that, and the controls and the feel, and what things you leave in, what things you take out, right, to make it have the most appeal, but still keep the depth.
Kind of swing more traditional fantasy, so in Oblivion it's more castles and lots of shiny armor, a beautiful world. Like we wanted to do forests, we wanted lots of NPCs, lots of people. They all have full schedules, they'll eat, they'll sleep.
Oblivion was a very intentional pivot to something more accessible, and this wasn't without a backlash. Some fans of Morrowind saw it as a dumbing down of their favourite RPG. Many elements of the game were simplified. There seemed to be less skills, less weapon types, less factions and diseases. Having voice acting for every line of dialogue meant less speech options. Morrowind had been an incredible RPG sandbox, but with the dawn of HD graphics, Todd and the team had to pick their battles. They wanted a bigger world, they wanted far more detail, they wanted a more simplified interface that would work on consoles. They wanted to bring fantasy into the mainstream, and that meant paring back. But the team was still small, and all this work required to make Oblivion the game they wanted to make wasn't without its challenges.
So the forests for Oblivion were really interesting. We used SpeedTree. We were, I believe, the first video game company to use SpeedTree.
No way.
Yeah, and it worked incredibly well for us. It was great. But what we ended up doing is we used all the SpeedTree assets and we'd bake them out and we'd put them in the game, and we created a procedural generation system. So we generated each area of the game and made it, and it turned out it wasn't so good. So all the artists then basically did like a terraforming pass where we'd go over the procedurally generated work and make it handcrafted, and it took 2 years to do.
Right.
It was an insane undertaking, and we had to really ramp up the team of environment artists to come do that.
Like we knew what we needed to make, we knew the number of towns, but like, okay, this town has how many buildings, how many NPCs, how many interiors, how many exteriors, like all the details. So it used to be, well, we need a town, somebody make it. And then the artist would go off and make it, and the designer would help design it, and then you'd have your town. So it was really, from that to now, it's, it's very much more designed out as far as how big the town is, how many buildings are in it, what it's made up of. The way we designed the dungeons, some of them were for quests, and some of them were more randomized, and then we had the Oblivion realm. So it's like, okay, making dungeons is obviously a big part of this, and it's sort of separated there. And then figuring out how we were going to make all the Oblivion realms. So I remember that as a key part on the schedule. Like we had our game and our date, and we knew what we were doing, but the Oblivion realms, we still hadn't quite figured out what they were.
During this stage at BGS, there was no delineation between designers. Level designers were also quest designers, and as the game got more complex, this was beginning to cause issues. Elements of the game were getting trimmed in an attempt to make the Xbox 360 launch date, and in some cases, to even fit the game on the disc.
So in the shipping game, there's an arena in the Imperial City, and the original plan was there was going to be an arena in every city. And I had done the majority of that work, and we ripped it all out because we realized we needed to focus on one to make it better. That was painful. That was 800 lines of dialogue. That was all the scripting work, and it was definitely the right decision, absolutely. It was fun to do all the fighting and fight and become the champion, but I actually really enjoy, when I play it, just betting on a fight and watching and finding all the weird bugs with that. Like, I would set it up so that the two combatants, there would be a Nord woman and an elf guy, and I look at the script, they were always really evenly matched, and invariably, one team would always win, and it was supposed to be random, and I didn't know why. And I wasn't taking into account some of like the racial ability. Like, Nords are stronger.
Right.
So this guy was beating the crap out of this person, and I didn't, and so, you know, I had to figure out all that stuff, and
The Khajiits were always losing.
yeah,
Like,
they were just, yeah.
Won't you die?
You know, I like, what do I do? How do I draw upon what I know about it? Because, you know, write what you know is a big thing, and I don't know much about being a medieval assassin. So, but I was raised Catholic, and so the entire structure of the storyline and the lore in the Dark Brotherhood and Oblivion is really a twisted sort of bastardization of Catholicism.
Right.
There's Sithis is God, there's the Night Mother is Mary. So it was really easy for me to just like, let's take this, make it evil, and like turn those dials and flip those switches, and it just all fell into place.
Right.
And that probably says more about Catholicism than me, but I don't know.
You sleep rather soundly for a murderer. That's good. You'll need a clear conscience for what I'm about to propose.
The funny thing about the Dark Brotherhood, it is really, unlike a lot of trends in assassin games, there's not a lot of moral ambiguity. Actually, it's like, you're a murderer and you get paid for it. So how do I make that acceptable? And so a lot of times the people you're killing, they deserve it. You know what I mean? It's sort of the Dexter thing where they're scumbags. But a lot of times there was this term we used, deliciously evil. You just have to have this really dark sense of humor about it. So when you're sent to kill someone, you find the dark humor in that, and you have to lighten it up in parts and not make it too dark, because then you dwell on, really, I'm a horrible murdering person, and I don't, you know.
Welcome, brother. So good to finally meet you. I hope you're getting along all right.
That was part of it. Like, let's make it like a family of rejects. You know, of a sad. There's the vampire guy over here. There's the cat who hates you until then at the very end of the game, he decides he's been wrong and he likes you, and then you come back and he's been horribly murdered. Like, you know, so little twists like that, you know.
Get away from me.
So for us, for Oblivion, compared to Morrowind, you know, the biggest thing is scale. Morrowind's actually kind of a small game, and if you actually look at the draw distance, it's foggy pretty much right in front of the player. We didn't have LOD, there were no mountain views in Morrowind. So for Oblivion, it was, hey, you're in this giant valley, you can see the mountains everywhere, and that's what started the whole, hey, if I can see it, I can go there and explore it. That really happened in Oblivion. That initial view when you come out of the dungeon from character generation and see the world and see the water and see the ruins reflected in it, we spent a lot of time on like the framing of that, how the water looks, how the mountains look, to know that, hey, welcome to this world, go do whatever you want in it.
Elder Scrolls games are like kitchen sink games. There's so many systems, so much crafting, there's magic, there's just all these different systems that have to interact together. There are cities you can explore that are teeming with people.
How are you?
There hasn't been a nuclear annihilation yet. You know what I mean? Like everything's still there, everything's still beautiful.
So we started getting into this thing, we realized that the guards are the best reflection. We started doing this in Oblivion. The guards are the best reflection of the character So they comment on you, they comment on what you're wearing, your accomplishments, like, hey, I heard you did this thing, or like, and it gets really tough with stuff like the Thieves Guild, or like, did I see you sneaking out of that house? You know, like.
But in the voice cast in general had not been figured out, other than let's bring folks back from Morrowind who we like. Michael Mack, the voice of the Red Guards and so forth.
You want to be a combatant? Wait, you're serious, aren't you?
Cast a few more people to fill in the space, or change up cast from before.
Ooh, look, a fly. Buzz, buzz. Hey, look, everybody, I'm talking to a fly. Buzz, buzz, buzz.
And all in all, it's 10 or 11 actors for what I think started out, it was 60, 70,000 lines of dialogue, and eventually we had to trim that down to 40, 50 or something like that to shift with, because it physically, at the time, we could not fit it on the disc. It was just too much, something had to go.
You're a big fat liar. Brother Joffrey, he should be in the Priory House, I think. I don't see any good options here.
One actor per race gender, and some are even shared. The Nords, I think the male Nord and the male Orc are the same guy. And originally they were going to be different, and we had to combine them. And it was just pure disk space, whereas now you could just, we can just tack on another archive that you could download. It's all down to your local hard drive space on your console or whatever you're playing on. So it's a lot of ground covered by very few people. So days and days and days and days and days of just Imperial Mail with Wes Johnson, our local voice actor.
In fact, I always forget his name, but one of our voice actors, I see him like once every 2 months at the Dunkin' Donuts down the street. I swear to God, I'm always meaning to say hi to him. I can never remember his name. It's so embarrassing.
And he goes, Holt.
And he's great. I'm like, next time.
Oblivion's 4-year development cycle was tough on the team. They had doubled in size trying to keep up with the workload, causing them to miss the Xbox 360 launch by 4 months. But this delay probably only contributed to Oblivion's success. By the time the game arrived on store shelves, console players were foaming at the mouth to get their hands on this game. The scale of Oblivion was something that had never been seen on consoles before, and while some of the Morrowind fans may have felt that the game had been overly simplified, Oblivion struck a chord with gamers in a way that no RPG ever had before. Not only was this a red letter day for the open world console game, but it tapped into a love of the fantasy genre that had never had its mainstream moment. You could argue that the release of the Lord of the Rings films had helped, or perhaps they had just tapped into the same thing.
I think there are certain things that people just always like, and there's nothing wrong with representing it. That the image they have in their head of like, I'm in a fantasy world. You have this image in your head, and as you change and technology changes, it's still awesome, right? We don't need to like say like, oh, that's not, we shouldn't do that. We should do something totally different. And I think it was Lord of the Rings had come out and gotten very, very popular in that window. But I think the technology, it was the first big open world game that anyone could play.